Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today I have an interview with my dear client Angela. This past weekend she just ran her first marathon, so I am bringing her on so she can tell you a little bit about her journey to 26.2. All right, guys, so today we have Miss Angela. She has been a client of mine, and this past weekend, she just ran her first marathon with me here in Miami. So, Angela, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Um, so my name is Angela. I am currently residing in Southern Georgia. Originally born and raised in Texas. I have a 18-year-old child or son, I guess, who is graduating high school this year. And I am currently working two jobs, two and a half jobs, depending on the day. So between single parenting, two and a half jobs, and life in general, that's pretty much what I do, as well as train. So finding Allie has been a blessing most days. Most days.
Well, tell us how running the actual marathon went. You know, there's a lot of us that dream of running a marathon. So tell us about how your first marathon actually went. Tell us about that experience.
Um, I don't know if I had, in some aspects, a lot of expectations, at least as far as the event. I haven't run a lot of actual live races. So as far as setup and course and things like that, I didn't have a lot of expectations. There was definitely a lot of energy at the beginning. Seeing that many people at the beginning was a little overwhelming. Definitely kind of got in my head as to the number of people. Some that clearly take it, do this on a more regular basis, take it a lot more serious. It was, from that perspective, a little overwhelming at the beginning. The actual running of it was a nice course. Considering it was my first one, pretty. There was plenty of distractions to look at and things of that nature. It was, I liked the setup of the different aid stations along the way. Those were nicely paced out, which I was a little worried about, even though I had my own hydration pack and fuel. It was still nice to know that, I guess if I needed it, aid wasn't necessarily too far away. And especially being in a city that I don't know, and having, I guess, limited contacts, as far as not, your mom's not there, your kid's not there, people that you're used to having a phone call away, you don't have that immediate support. So knowing that there were people and the trained professionals along the way was nice.
What did you think was going to happen?
I don't know. I don't know. It was definitely, I think I'm one of those that, I definitely get in my own head. It's one thing when, like I said, I think being more so outside of my normal environment, having traveled for it, being my first trip by myself, and then to do something as big, definitely had me in my feelings on different levels. So it was a lot of emotional layers. And so
A lot of firsts for you.
A lot of firsts. It really was my first all girls trip, my first marathon, my first, like there was just a lot of uh, first all wrapped up into it. So there was a lot of emotions from a lot of different levels. But the actual course, the having the bands and the DJs along the way, I want to say it might have been around the halfway mark. I remember going like under like the metro station or what, or the rail station, and like the bands that they had set up or whatever. And I don't know if it was just with where I was and hitting mentally that part of the race, and being having moved that long and kind of getting a little bit of the runner's high and the music and all of that. Like it was just infectious at that point, kind of to where like I just kind of remember like dancing through that whole little, like just kind of like dancing through it, because it was just like the energy coming from the crowd, the music. And even at different points along the way, still doing that, like getting that little burst of energy from the crowd and everything else. So like I said, to be really only my third live race and my biggest one to date, like having that along the way definitely kept it from dragging more, or hitting those lower spots, or about the time I'd kind of be like, okay, how much more of this do I have to do? Like there would be that nice little pick me up along the way. Awesome. So, but it was plenty of scenery, definitely plenty of scenery to look at, and to where you're not as distracted, or you're distracted from everything else at times.
Yeah, I mean, Miami is definitely a beautiful course. I think it's a good one for beginner runners because it is nice and flat for the most part outside of those bridges. But talk about physically, right? Mentally, you said that there were little things along the way that kind of kept that morale up. But physically, I know that was something that was really huge. Like physically, can I do this? Was there at any point where you felt like, this hurts, this sucks? How did you feel physically during the race?
For the most part, I didn't feel too bad. There were definitely parts where, because of the day, like if it being as warm as it was, and they're not necessarily at certain points having a lot of, there wasn't a lot of cloud cover or no cloud cover, and hitting the points where it was like really hot, it definitely at times would get to me, to where it's kind of like, how, like, can I get a breeze? Can I get a cloud, something, a cloud, a plane, anything to come across and just break up the intensity of the sunshine, would have been nice. I did probably, starting about the 17-mile mark, from the amount of fuel and water, and Gatorade or whatever, I did start to kind of get the rumblies and the tumblies, to where I was looking for either a porta potty or a restroom or something of that nature, just because you're running and running that distance, things happen. You see stories online of this person pooped their pants and still ran, or this person got sick, or this person or you see people kind of, because of the heat or whatever, you see them kind of bent over and trying to cool off and things like that. And then you start, when you're seeing people kind of just naturally be taken out, and you're looking at them and they look fitter than you, or they look more like a stereotypical elite runner or whatever. And you're like, well, damn, if they're getting taken out, if this is getting to them, how much longer do I have before it starts getting to me? And then, especially in the lower miles, having it, you start kind of like, okay, you're like 20, 26, or well, there's mile 1, 25 more to go, 24 more to go, 22, you're like, and then like, as we got to the point,
take one down, pass it around.
hey, you do, you really and truly do. And then, I mean, I'm not going to lie. There was seriously a point where, the closer I got to, the halfway point, and we'd been out in the sun. And at that point I'm moving almost 2.5 hours, 2 hours, 45 minutes based on my pace. The heat, I'd be lying if I said I didn't glance over and be like, because at that point you realize that once you pass that point, you're past the point of no return, really and truly. So, even having done my long runs, that's again with where I'm at in the way my routes would go. Like, I was never necessarily very far from the car in some aspects, where you're like, okay, I can always quit and go home and it's easy. And at that point you're like, there's no quitting. There's no turning around at that point. So physically, like I said, it wasn't until towards the 18, 19 mile mark that I started to kind of experience, it was more stomach pains. My legs didn't necessarily, I don't recall them ever necessarily being overly tired or hurting or anything. It was definitely towards that point where my mind started to kind of to impact me, because I'd only gone as far as 18 miles in my training plan, due to some other issues. So especially once I hit that 18-mile mark, and it's like, well, crap, this is as far as I've gone. Anything past this is an unknown. It's even scarier. You're again, you're in a new city, a new thing. Like, there's so many firsts, that it's, but at that point you're like, okay, 26 minus 18, like you're trying to math in your head, and you're like, okay, like not much more. And then you've got, and it was even funnier at times because like you have the crowd going, just 7 more miles, and you're going, y'all can't count, like with my like like it was definitely, from that perspective, it was definitely more mental, just getting past, knowing I was getting past a point that I hadn't been before. I would say I really hit the mental wall at around the 24, 25 mile mark. That for me was where I really started to, I think I was kind of looking at the time and everything else. And I'm like, all right, well, you know what? Well, I'm far enough ahead of the sweeper bus. I can walk it from here. I can just like, I just easily stroll my way through this, and I'm golden. But having my friend Jessica with me, and her being there to help pace me, and this being her, I think she counted them up, her 10th marathon that she had done. Having her support and encouragement, knowing that I'm like, well, and with you being further back, I'm like, you know what? I can't let Allie catch me. I can't. But at the same time, there's a part of me, I'm like, but then I could finish with everybody else. So like, there's that.
No, you get bragging rights. You beat Coach Allie in a race.
It'll probably be the only one I ever beat Coach Allie in. It'll probably be one. But like, it was bittersweet in that, as having worked together so long, that, wanting to cross the finish line with you at the same time, but at the same time knowing that there were other clients that needed you more than I did, and still having Jessica there to support me. It was bittersweet on a lot of different levels.
Definitely, but bittersweet on my end too. I mean, I just watched my baby cross the finish line. I wasn't there. I love all of my clients, but there's the first never will get replaced, right? So for those of you that don't know, I've been a coach for a while, but COVID came and just completely knocked everyone out, right? You know, I couldn't work in the gym, I couldn't train people in person, and I was figuring out the online space. I had never been an online coach before. And Miss Angela took that chance and became my very first online client. So now, 2 years later, watching her run her first marathon with me here in Miami, oh my gosh, it was so emotional.
Like it was like it has definitely been an interesting journey. Like you know, from us starting, me getting back into fitness, you starting online. Like I remember, you know, I had started running because a friend wanted to run a 5K on the same weekends in our respective cities, and starting Couch to 5K on my own. And then I think I was about halfway through it, give or take, when you and I started. And then when I finished that, going, okay, let's, you know what, screw this. I want to do a 10K before I turn 40. It was, you know, and I remember driving back, calling you, and you being like, okay, so when are we doing the first marathon? And I was like, ha, ha, like, screw you. That's never happening. Like, you've lost your mind. And at which point I've also learned never to tell you no. So, you know, it's sometimes still shocking to me how far in 2 years I've come. That I had a friend message me on Facebook when I started posting about training, that she's like, I remember you talking about this years ago, that you were at some day going to do this. And I don't remember that conversation, but for her to remember it and to be like, no, you were talking about this 15 years ago. And I'm like, and I did it. A goal that I don't even remember setting for myself, that I did it at a point where I even had a lady at my main job. She told me that I actually saw her the day after when I went into work. She happened to be staying. She's like, I was hoping to see you, find out how your race went. And she looked at me. She's like, here I am at 42 and I'm still making excuses. She's like, and you just did it. I was like, you're only older than me by a year. So, you know, I'm like, let me know. And it was so weird, like how quickly I was just like, I'm less than 24 hours out. And I'm like, well, if you need a running buddy, like, let me know. But it's an interesting journey. It has definitely been, and a lot of that came up while running, as far as the people that have told me along the way over the last 5.5 months of, you're crazy. What are you thinking? There's no way. Like, you've lost your mind. It's definitely an experience that you learn not only what you have internally, but who your friends are and who your true support system is. Because I couldn't have done this without you, without Jessica, without some of my friends that are like, so they're like, when are you posting your next run? What do you have? Like, what's on your training? Like, and them staying to where they almost knew my training schedule better than I did. And I'm like, well, then it gets to that point where you're like, well, I got to do it now. I can't let the rest of them down. Like it, you know, you've told me that running is at times that running is a solo sport, and on some levels it is, but it is still very much an interesting community and tribe of people that we are. Yeah. So even people that don't necessarily run are like out here cheering for me to do something big. Yeah. So it was hot. It was sweaty. You know, it was challenging, more mentally than physically. And I will say it was more mentally challenging because of how well you helped me prepare physically.
Mhm.
I wasn't as worried about my body holding up as I was about the mental part of it. We got to the end. Jessica and I did at that 25-ish mile mark. And I told Jessica to get my phone out of the back of my water pack. And I'm like, I'm going to go Facebook Live when I cross the finish line. And then Jessica said we got at about the 26-mile mark. And Jessica's like, my entire demeanor kind of changed. She's like, at that point, for whatever reason, between mile 25 and a quarter and mile 26, I got in my own head again to where I'm like, I can't go any further. I can't do. Jessica's turning around, yelling at me. And I'm like, just let me walk. Just let me walk. I'll be fine. I can walk across the finish. And her turning around, looking at me and going, are you hurt? Are you physically hurt? Is something going to fall off? Have you pulled a muscle? Are you dying? Do we need duct tape? What do we need to do? And I'm like, no. And she's like, so are you hurting because you've been running 26 miles? Yeah. Then run. You have 0.2 of a mile. Run. And people yelling, 2 stoplights. You've got 2 more stoplights, 2 more and then I'm going, but there's 4. Where's the again, you start questioning, am I hallucinating? Am I not counting? Because I'm pretty sure I see 4, not 2.
Right.
So
well, and I think that the Miami Marathon is very, very misleading because you don't see the finish line until you make that final turn. So people are like, it's right there. And you're like, you have basically 200 feet and you're like, where? I don't see it until that final little turn.
And you're like, they're like, no. And you see the, I guess the chute that they funnel you down into or whatever. And you're like, okay, I know I should be I'm looking, like you said, I'm looking for balloons or streamers or something. And you don't see that until you round that last little bit. And it's after the lights and they're like, it's 2 lights. And you're like, two, but there's no, at 2 lights, there's no balloons. There's no balloons at those 2 lights. And so, but it was such an experience to hear when your chip crosses that final marker and you hear the announcer say your name and the city you're from. That was something, because the other races have been so small, they don't do that. That was a whole new experience. I've never been a competitor. I won't say that. I've never officially competed in anything. I never played competitive sports. So I've never had my name called other than graduation. So to have my name announced like that, not that anyone necessarily cared, but it was a big deal. They're calling names left and right, and no one I know is there other than Jessica, and you were well far behind, so you weren't hearing it. But
I heard it in my heart, I promise.
I know you did. But to have your name called out like that is, and to be called out as a finisher of something that so few people in this world will actually ever do. That put me in, while I may not be an elite athlete in the running world community, from as far as competing for money and medals and things of that nature, I am in an elite percentage of the world. And to start it at 39 and a half years old, kind of late to the game in some aspects. And I think when we started, I was at least 50 pounds heavier. That's it's a hell of a big deal on a lot of levels personally.
Yeah.
So, um, it was definitely more mental though. It is definitely more mental. You are not the same person at the start of the race, at the end of the race, as you are at the start of the race.
You weren't the same person at the end of your training that you were at the beginning of your training either.
No, definitely not. A lot of, I won't say blood, because there were that I've yet, knock on wood, I've yet to shed any blood so far. Definitely
But there were sweat and tears.
There were definitely a lot of sweat and a lot of tears. There was definitely, along the way, you and I have had several phone calls where, as we got past the half marathon mark, and getting into those longer distances, questioning myself as to whether or not I could do it, whether or not I was strong enough, whether or not, and then after having such a bad first 18-mile run, with the leg spasms and things of that nature, and having such a long distance or a long time frame between that run and a redo, instead of doing the 20-mile run. Like, I remember texting you going, I'm going to be sick. There's no way I'm going to sit here. Like, I'm ready to cry. My anxiety was through the roof. And you calling me going, okay, talk this through. What are your thoughts? And the support and the ass kicking for because I needed it. I did. I am definitely that person. And there's a part of me with, like, at only one point since you and I have worked together, and I'll say this much, it scared me enough to probably put me into action when you're like, if you can't do this, I'm going to seriously worry about you on race day. And it was at that point, whether or not you had real fears about me being able to complete race day or not, that was enough of a kick to be like, crap, I have to do this. If I don't do this, I'm potentially not going to be able to finish. And then what have I been doing? So that was definitely the mental kick that I needed to be like, nope, okay, out of my head, it's time to do this. And then again, it's as those miles click and you settle into that pace and you're like, okay, I'm good. 1 mile down, 2 miles down, 3 miles down. You get that comfortableness and you're like, okay, we're good. We're okay. Nothing's hurting. All right. No, we're good. Feet are there. Legs are there. Okay. Keep moving. So, yeah, that.
Well, and I think that goes to show, like, in a marathon training plan is so long. Like you said, when you were like calculating how long 20 weeks is actually, it's a long time. Chances are nobody in life is going to have 20 weeks where everything goes perfectly as planned. There are going to be bad runs. There are going to be bad days. You're going to get sick. Things are going to happen. But I think one powerful thing is that you did have me to say, hey, you had a bad run. It's okay. We still have time to reconfigure your schedule and make sure that you're ready for race day, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's some support that people don't have, where they, one little thing in a marathon training plan goes wrong and suddenly they think like, oh my gosh, I've done all of this work for nothing, without knowing how to change their plan, go with the flow, and kind of refine and move forward.
Yeah. Because if it wasn't for knowing that, I could text you and be like, well, I missed this run, or this week this has come up. Like, how do I can I move if I do this here on if I go this and that, like like how to move those pieces. I definitely would have panicked, and I think I would have finally, like midway through, would have went, you know what, screw this, I'm done. I quit. I'm done. Nope, not happening.
Can I do my long run on a Wednesday? How do we move the week around?
Can I do it on Thursday? So yeah, so I'm gonna do it on Thursday. So I'm gonna need you to reconfigure. Yeah.
I'm like, all right, here we go.
Got an unexpected federal holiday in the middle of the week. So you know what? We're gonna take advantage of this and rearrange some stuff. Because yeah, I wouldn't have known how to make those adjustments and be okay and actually and it work to my advantage and not potentially cause an injury or something in that regard, and how to do that. So
Yeah.
that's just things that, I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of people on Facebook that can tell you, but at the same time, to have someone that you know knows the training plan and knows what I'm doing and who is there, has been there along my journey to know what my body is capable of, that when I tell you that this did this or this did that, it's kind of like having that doctor you've been going to for years, and you're like, well, this, like, you just have that understanding. And if I say, well, this did this, you're like, okay, okay, you understand what
We've
I'm
seen this before. We know how
Yeah.
to handle this.
Yeah. So yeah, you understand my insane lingo. Yes.
But I think that's the thing, is that it was not just a perfect, not necessarily an injury, but it wasn't a pain-free training either. You had aches and pains along the way where you're like, gosh, like this was bothering me or this was tight. And you took care of it, right? We had a plan to take care of your body throughout the training plan, and not pushing through the aches and the pains to the point that it turned into an injury. So I think that's another thing, is that you had been running with me long enough, is that we had that communication and that understanding of listening to our bodies, taking care of our bodies when it's whispering and not when it's screaming at us. And I think that really helped you physically being able to run this race, because throughout this conversation, it's been a reoccurring theme. Physically, you were just fine. Physically, you are more than capable, but that mental aspect, that fear, I mean, that is something so huge to overcome. And Angela, you crushed it. You took those fears and you ran full force and you finished that marathon, girl.
Yes. Yes. And I still, like, there's parts of it that still, I don't think some of it has settled in, is like people have been like, oh, how'd your race go? Or how did, and it's one of those that I know I've done it. Clearly, I've got pictures, I've got video, I've got my medal, I've got the map of the course. I know what, but I think it's one of those that it's kind of a weird relation or line to draw, but it's kind of like, in some aspects, it's kind of like giving birth. Like, you realize, like, they give you the baby and you realize, like, oh, I've created this human. Okay, I've got this human. And then it just slowly over the next few days, like, it sinks in even more and more. Like, I have this human that I'm supposed to take care of. And this, I won't say heaviness, because that's not exactly the right word, but like you realize exactly what you
The
took on.
life-changing thing that you just did.
Yeah. Like it settles, and it's one of those that I'm like, oh crap.
But you know what the worst part is? You want to know what the worst part is? It's also like childbirth, because in a couple days you forget how much that marathon actually hurt, and you're like, I could have another one. Like, I could do another race, because you have that euphoria of like, I did it. Oh my gosh, I could have another one. And I know this isn't the end for you, Miss Angela.
No, it's not. It's not. And that's what, and it is funny because, because of the Facebook groups that I'm in and things of that nature, like I see or, you got to love Google and Facebook or whatever, because, that I get different races like this marathon or this half marathon or this or that. And I start looking at, okay, so if that's then, and it took me this long to train, like it's how quickly, and like I said, the day, less than 2 days after, when I walk in to my job, and the lady's like, I'm about ready to quit giving excuses. If you can do it, I can do it. And how quickly I'm like, well, let me know when you want to run. Like, I'm like less than 2 days out. And I'm like, sure, let me know when we're going to start. Like, and I'm like, wait, what did I just volunteer for? What did I just do? And it's, I think it's one of those that, as with most things, once you do it once and you learn it, that once that initial fear is gone, that you're like, oh, okay, wasn't as bad as I thought. We can do this again. I don't know how frequently I'll do them, but but it is definitely something that I will do again. It is definitely something I will do again. So, and if for no other reason, because there's just enough haters in my life that tell me I'm crazy and I should probably do other things. So that's part of it too. So it's always nice to be able to be like, haha, yeah, so about that.
Well, what would you say to anybody that is thinking about doing a marathon, or they're afraid to sign up, or they are just getting started with running? What would you say to somebody? What do they need to hear?
It's okay to doubt. It's okay. It's okay to have fears. But what's not okay is to let that be what controls you. At some point and I've come back to it more and more here over probably the last couple, especially the last month, where it's always, you can be fat or you can be fit, pick your hard. You can be broke or you can be rich, pick your hard. You can be uncomfortable for that small amount of time in the grand scheme of life. 5 months, 5.5 months out of my 41 years, almost 42 years on this earth, is a drop in the bucket. Can I be uncomfortable for 5.5 months to achieve something that I really want? What is my heart? What am I picking? Am I going to sit here and pick, potentially looking back in another 40 years and being like, you know what? I should have done it. I would rather be uncomfortable and scared momentarily than have a life of regret. It's knowing that I've been fortunate in having you as my coach, and the friendship that you and I have built over the last 2 years, having someone, and especially a female, as a woman, having another female who actually genuinely cares and supports and encourages, regardless of our age difference, that, because it's even harder with you being so, with the age gap, sometimes that, we look at each other, and a lot of women my age look at you and you're like, oh, well, you're my competition on so many levels, not just as an athlete, but in so many other levels in life. And to have my would-be competitor be my biggest cheerleader, it's been life-changing on a lot of different levels. It really and truly has. Do what scares you. You take the time to be scared. It's okay. sit with it, acknowledge it, but move past it. Bigger and better things are on the other side of that fear. And I'm living proof. We've got three of us that crossed the had to think for a second. There were 4 of us there. 3 of us that crossed that finish line in, various, I guess if you want to say the start of middle age or whatever, however you want to put it for women later in life, that we're doing hard things and we're coming out so much better for the challenge and for overcoming that fear. Having Mackenzie and Kelly there, that's an experience that the 3 of us will always share. Even though we didn't cross the finish line together, that's an experience the 3 of us will always share together and will bond us.
Yeah.
We each had our own challenges, our own fears, our own doubts, and whether along the training or whatever, we kicked ass. We overcame it. We even used each other, to talk about the fears of, as a mother, how do we balance this when we're trying to train and the kids are crying, or we've got, with my son being in high school, I've got baseball games and I've got this and I've got that, and trying to work 2 jobs, trying to do the time management. Not always the easiest. And there were definitely days that I was like, oh dear Lord, I really don't want to go do this run. I'm like, I wonder what excuse could I give Allie to make to where she won't be mad at me.
You think there's an excuse I will accept?
I tried to get creative. I won't lie. I tried to get creative. Hey, no one is as creative. I went back to my high school days of like, let's see, how could I get out of this test?
Dog ate your homework. Great. Here's another form. Here's another piece of homework. Go do that one.
Like, how long do I hold the thermometer up to the lamp before mom walks into the room? There are parts that, to say that by the end of it, weren't, I don't know if mundane, but it definitely got to a point where it was really and truly a part where you're looking at it and you're like, how bad do I want this? Because I can make the excuses, I can miss the runs. I did my long runs, most of them on Sunday. That's 2, 3, 4 hours of my Sunday. My only really and truly day off from both of my jobs. That, how do I manage that? Am I willing to sacrifice that much of my time? Yeah. And it boils down to, how bad do you want it? Because I would take extended lunch breaks to fit my runs in, or I would leave work 20, 30 minutes early to start my run. So I had enough time between jobs to come home, shower, change, and get to the other one. If you want it bad enough, you'll find the time. You will definitely, let me rephrase this. You don't find time, you make the time. And that's what it boils down to.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Angela, I am super, super proud of you. It was such an honor to not only coach you through this for the last couple years, but to be able to be there for your first, at least the start of your first race, and to get to celebrate with you afterwards. And I look forward to seeing where the rest of your journey goes. So you guys, that's it for me and Angela today. I will talk to you guys very soon.